Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not recognizing the difference between the expression may permit and but no person shall be entitled to do so without permission as used in section 88 of the Criminal Procedure Code and the requirement to seek leave as used in law. 26. Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not recognizing that the victim has a natural locus standi in criminal justice that surpasses that of the Director of Public Prosecutions and the state. Number 27. Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not finding that the applicant, having written to the Honourable Chief Magistrate, Nyeri Law Court, had in effect instituted proceedings against the persons named in the complaint in writing. 28. Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not finding that the Honourable Chief Magistrate Ubroda Juma erred in law and procedure by failing to sign the complaint in writing so filed by the applicant. 29. Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not finding that the Honourable Chief Magistrate Ubroda Juma denied the applicant the right to justice. 30. Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not finding that the Honourable Chief Magistrate Ubroda Juma denied the applicant public service that is expeditious, efficient, lawful, reasonable, and procedurally fair. 31. Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not finding that the Honourable Chief Magistrate denied the applicant the right to be given written reasons as to why the law could not protect the applicant. Number 32. Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not finding that the Honourable Chief Magistrate Ubroda Juma denied the victim protection by the law. 33. Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by missing the import of other person or authority in Article 157(6) of the Constitution of Kenya in access to criminal justice by victims. Number 34. Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not recognizing that the Constitution of Kenya and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Act do not address themselves to the procedure for institution of proceedings against criminal suspects. Justice James Wakiaga. I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not recognizing that Section 5(1)(b) Roman 1 of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions Act recognizes the distinction between institution of proceedings and the conduct of proceedings. 36. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by misinterpreting Article 157 of the Constitution of Kenya to mean that the state has entire and absolute powers to prosecute criminal suspects. Number 37. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not recognizing that Article 157(6) contemplates institution of proceedings by other persons. Number 38. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty in failing in law and fact by not recognizing that there is nothing in the flesh the Director of Public Prosecutions shall exercise state powers of prosecution, that indicates these powers to prosecute are absolute, entire, and exclusive. Number 39. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not finding that justice cannot be a prisoner of the institution of the police, the institution of the Director of Public Prosecutions, or any other state office. Number 40. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty of failing to quote the winning arguments of the defense by the Directorate of Public Prosecutions. 41. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty of failing to recognize that the constitutional duties of the Directorate of Public Prosecutions cannot override the natural and constitutional rights to justice for people in the jurisdiction of the Constitution of Kenya. Number 42. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty of failing to recognize that the powers and duties of the Director of Public Prosecutions are supposed to serve justice and not to grant the person of the Director of Public Prosecutions bragging rights. Number 43. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty of failing to recognize that the powers and duties of the Director of Public Prosecutions failed to provide justice to the applicant in environments that are open to the public. Number 44. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty in law and fact by erecting the Director of Public Prosecutions as the god of criminal justice, without whom no one can assess the courts or the taxpayers' money that is meant to run the justice machine. Number 45. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty for failing in law and fact by not recognizing that for a magistrate or a judge to send away a victim of injustice into the expensive and uncharted waters of private prosecution is to spit in the face of the victim. 46. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not recognizing that for a magistrate or a judge to send away a victim of injustice in the expensive and uncharted waters of private prosecution is unconstitutional. 47. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not recognizing that for a magistrate or a judge to set away a victim into the expensive and uncharted waters of private prosecution is to invite the victim to dance naked in exchange for justice. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty for failing in law and fact by not finding that justice is a natural right which predates and supersedes written law. Number 49. Justice James Wakiaga, I find you guilty of failing in law and fact by not recognizing that private prosecution is acceptance of state cronyism